The College Baseball World Series preview. Welcome to the Just Baseball Show. It is Thursday, June 13th. You got myself, Peter Apple. You got Aram Layton, the man, the myth, the legend, also joins us. It is Pete Flaherty from Baseball America. We're going to break down every team that made it to Omaha, as well as some of Pete's surprises and disappointments from the regionals and the super regionals. And it is all brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. All you got to do, folks, we're going to download BetMGM on iOS or Android. Then we're going to use code JustBaseball. Why? First bet offer up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if you lose. So if you place a bet using code JustBaseball and it loses, you will get that amount back in bonus bets. And if you win, nothing happens. It's an absolute no-brainer, and you can find it in the episode description. Gambling problem? Call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 or older. Terms and conditions apply. Pete, I can assume that you're probably mentally drained, and just by your appearance, you've been sitting outside watching college baseball. How are you doing?
Dude, I know. Hopefully this episode I can take some of the heat off Arm for the freaking eyeshadow comments. They can talk about my sunburn. So that'll you guys can chirp me for that instead of Arm. But no, I've been doing great. Like, this is the best time of year where you got the tournament and supers, and now we got College World Series coming up, and then that leads right into the draft. So you're right in that it's pedal to the metal here for a few weeks to a month, but like you guys, like, I'm in the mindset of there's nothing better. So I'm really lucky to be able to follow it and do it as like a quote unquote living. It's still insane, but I'm really fired up for the next 10 days here.
So just kind of the way I watch it, I'm usually just watching for enjoyment. Of course, I'm watching some of the draft prospects, and that's usually where I'll key in a little bit more. But overall, I don't think I'm watching as in depth enough to be able to compare years of like how competitive this year was compared to this year or whatever it may be. But I'm curious what you think, because obviously last year was a gauntlet, especially at the end, and the matchup that we got that I think was one of the best matchups we've seen in college baseball history, especially on the mound. How would you say like the regionals this year kind of stacked up with the regionals last year in terms of just caliber of talent, maybe just quality of play? Because I think you like college basketball this past year, that the quality of play was down, especially in March Madness. I'm just curious how you see the baseball side this year.
Yeah, it's a great question. So last year, and we had them for a while, it was like LSU and Wake Forest, like they were the two teams, and then it was everyone else. This year, it wasn't like that. We had a lot of teams in that number one slot. Kind of every week there would be an upset and some shuffling. So I think the tournament kind of reflects that. We obviously had a few upsets and a couple of surprises, as we'll get to at some point. But like, any of these 8 teams in the College World Series right now have a very valid argument as to why they can win it. And I think it's overall way more competitive field than it was last year. I think last year, in terms of talent, was more talented with Dylan Cruz and Paul Skeens and all the weight guys with Brock Wilken and Rhett Lauder and Sean Sullivan. And I could just keep going on and on with Florida and Cags, but he's back there this year. But like, I think it's going to be, it'll be a dogfight in Omaha. Like, I love the aspect of ACC versus SEC. And I just think it's going to be super, super competitive. Like, I have no clue who's going to win it all. Like, I have my pick, but I have no clue.
And we're going to get to those picks at the very end. But before that, I want to ask you a quick question, because Aram talked about when he's watching college baseball, right? He's looking for draft prospects as well as just general entertainment. So last year's Aram might have enjoyed it more because there was more of the top prospects in the final 8 in Omaha. While this year, it seems like it's more balanced across the final 8 teams. You said it yourself that any of these 8 teams can win. And while we'll see Charlie Condon from Georgia, Travis Bazzana isn't in here, but Jack Caglione is. I'm curious, from a fan perspective, do you enjoy when it's more of a complete field of all teams that can win? Or do you prefer when you're seeing some of those juggernauts built with some of the best players in college baseball all on one team, and it's kind of like the 2 horsemen just jamming into each other? Or do you like more competition spread out?
Yeah, well, we won't see Condon because they got bounced. But
Facts,
I
my
like
bad.
no, you're good. Selfishly, I wish like Bazzana's my guy. Like, I'd take him 1-1 and not even think about it. I really, really was wishing that we'd see him here. But like there is a lot of talent in this year's field, and I like, of course, last year was the perfect storm where you have these unbelievable teams with LSU, Wake, Florida, even Virginia, and such high end talent. Like Wyatt Langford, we saw him play last year, and now he's in the big leagues making an impact in Texas. And Paul Skeens is looking like a potential rookie of the year in the NL. So I don't think there are any of those type guys in this year's Omaha 8, but there are a handful of guys who could go in the top 10, 15 picks, and certainly in the first round. Like you look up and down the bracket and across all the teams. Like you could just kind of go down like North Carolina with Vance Honeycutt, Virginia with Griff O'Farrell, Ethan Anderson, Tennessee with that big three of Christian Moore, Billy Amick, Blake Burke, FSU with James Tibbs, who, if you want like a real sleeper at 1-1, keep an eye out for Tibbs. And then Kentucky, Ryan Waldschmidt, NC State's got their guys with Jacob Kozart, who I'm personally not really high on, but they have some really talented underclassmen. And then with A&M in Florida, like A&M's down Braden Montgomery, which will really hurt. But for 25, they have a guy who will be talked about a ton in the 1-1 conversation in Jace Lavalette. And Florida's got, they're as probably as talented as any team in the field. Like Caglione is maybe the most famous player in college baseball. But no, like I don't think depth wise it's as deep as last year's field, but like there's a lot to hone in on if you're kind of a draft Nick and watch it more from a draft standpoint.
Selfishly, I got to squeeze in one quick draft question because I know we're going to talk about A&M, but I'm just curious what you think about Braden Montgomery and how the draft stock could potentially be affected at all with that ankle injury. Obviously, I think in the grand scheme, it's not a huge deal, but I just kind of think about DeLauder and he didn't fall just because of that. Like also DeLauder, we didn't have a lot of body of work being at JMU and on top of the injury, but I'm just thinking about DeLauder from the lens of recurring foot issue now. Like, could that be enough to scare teams off a bit, or is Montgomery's season and body of work something that's going to just keep him in the top 5 no matter what you think?
Yeah, like you certainly never want to see that happen to anyone, but like I think from a draft standpoint, he's fine. Like he did all he needed to do. The injury wasn't like an injury track record kind of injury where it's like he's re-injuring something that's been nagging him for a while. I guess like JJ Weatherholt's hamstring you could talk about, or Nick Kurtz's shoulder. Like it was just a freak crappy play, clean break of the right ankle. He already got surgery. It's done. And like he'll be with the team in Omaha in the next few days. But from a draft standpoint, like he won't play this summer or anything, but maybe starts to get some work in the fall and at the complex wherever he's at. But I think he's solidified himself as a top 10, probably potentially top 5 overall pick.
Let's do some surprises, then we'll do some disappointments, then we'll go team by team for a full preview. So Pete, we'll start with 2 surprises. Number 1, biggest surprise from regionals and super regionals for these 8 teams to get to Omaha.
That was a great question. When you texted me this afternoon, I was thinking about it for the last like 3 hours trying to come up with a good answer. I'd say surprise number 1, I'll keep it on the positive side, is Evansville's run. And it even dates back to the conference tournament. It was their first conference championship title since 2006. Then they go to, what was I'm completely blanking on the regional that they came out of. Oh, Greenville. And that was a really tough regional because you had ECU, Wake Forest, who were the 2 teams that I think everyone thought would be duking it out for that regional championship. And I thought Wake Forest was going to win that, and they kind of fell flat, and in a VCU team that won the Atlantic 10. So Evansville goes in there, they stun ECU in the opening game. Some things kind of fall into place where Wake gets upset by VCU. They go out and beat VCU and then beat ECU again in the winner take all game. So I think Evansville was a really positive surprise. I know that they were just 1 win away from Omaha and they lost last weekend in Knoxville, but unbelievable season, probably the best in program history to this point. It was I mentioned it, first conference tournament championship in almost 20 years and their first ever regional championship. And they were a really fun bunch to watch play. And then on a kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, I'd say Arkansas losing and not making it out of their regional. That was really, really shocking. I, along with pretty much everyone, had a lot of concern as to how that offense would hold up like in a regional setting, and especially on a day or games in which its pitching didn't really have it. And we kind of found out in unfortunate fashion where they go out and win kind of a crazy one in game one, 17-9, but they erase a huge deficit to do it. Or Southeast Missouri erased a huge deficit to take the lead, and then Arkansas scored like nine runs unanswered. But Hagen Smith just had one bad inning like he did on opening weekend against Kansas State, and then Simo goes out and doubles him up to knock him out. So I'd say Arkansas and how they lost was another really big surprise.
And what about disappointments? Like two teams where, I mean, Arkansas kind of fits that bill.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Pete, it seems like Arkansas is a little bit disappointing every year. It's just, it feels like the same thing. It's like they're lauded as one of the best teams in college baseball, and they were one of the best teams in college baseball, and they continually are, but they've just fallen short lately. So that could be kind of your third disappointment, but what were the other twos that you were thinking of?
For me, I expected more out of someone in the Norman regional, whether it was Oklahoma or Duke. Like I thought going in, I thought whoever came out of that regional had like an Omaha type of run in them. And I was particularly high on Oklahoma, and like they were pretty, it was kind of a tale of two teams throughout the regular season. They'd either go on this heater where they'd sweep like two series in a row and then take 2 of 3, and they'd be like 8-1, 9-1 in their last 10, and then they'd go out and get swept twice, and you'd be like, what is this team? But they had the pieces for a pretty deep run. Like I like that lineup a lot. And then on the mound, they had, I thought, a pretty dynamic 1-2 punch in the rotation with Braden Davis and Witherspoon. But UConn's experience just kind of reigned supreme there. So I was a little surprised that neither Oklahoma nor Duke came out of Norman. And then another one, I guess like Arizona and Santa Barbara, the two hosts that got knocked out and they couldn't make it out of their own regional, a lot like Oklahoma. But I'd say Santa Barbara a little bit more than Arizona. Like that Tucson regional was absolute hell. Like when that got announced, I legit thought that any of those 4 teams could come out of there. And whether it was Grand Canyon who did it, that was the 4 seed, or Arizona or any team in between, like what like West Virginia ended up doing, it wouldn't have shocked me at all. Like if Grand Canyon came out of there, like they pummeled Arizona a couple of times in the regular season. But like I think Arizona was a pretty disappointing showing for me, just like going 0-2 and bowing out on their home field. I wasn't expecting that, and it was kind of in convincing fashion too. And then with Santa Barbara, like they were my Omaha sleeper in the preseason. They quietly put together one of the better individual seasons of any team in the country. And like, I would have put that pitching staff personally up against any team in the country. Like I'd put them toe to toe with Arkansas. Like that's how good they were with Bremner and Gallagher and Gutierrez. And then you have Ager coming in as well. Like that's a freaking loaded staff. But like Arkansas, they couldn't really hit. And I was like, man, if they bow out here in their regional, it's going to be because they couldn't hit, and they ran into an Oregon team that really threw the ball well. They were outscored 5-0 in 2 games, and that was it. So I'd say the lack of showing from both those teams.
Previewing like some of the rest of the matchups here in the entire, College World Series, which are you most excited for as we just get ready to go? Because I figure that's probably the best place to start. And I'm just curious because we have a lot of really fun matchups. Of course, it's the College World Series. It's going to be the best of the best. But is there one that really sticks out to you as maybe the most exciting game right off the bat?
I think, it's such a competitive field that you could say any matchup is really exciting. But the one that I'm really focused on is Tennessee and Florida State. Like UNC and Virginia, we've seen them play already. Not saying that's going to be a great game, but that matchup's happened before. Like I'm loving the idea of the first round showdown between the Vols and Florida State, because you're probably going to get Jamie Arnold from FSU, who is the best pitcher left in the field right now, paired against potentially Drew Beam for Tennessee, and that Tennessee offense that's just relentless. And they led the country in home runs this year. And they play in a really hitter-friendly park in Lindsey Nelson Stadium in Omaha at Charles Schwab Field is the exact opposite of a hitter-friendly park. Like you got to really, really get it for it to go out. And Not saying that any of Tennessee's home runs were cheapies and a product of them playing in a boombox. Like those dudes all have legit power. I'm just curious to see if they can win by not relying on the home run, and they might still pummel it out of the Chuck box, but that matchup really fascinates me because on Florida State side, you also have like the college baseball version of the Bash Bros with Cam Smith and James Tibbs. But that lineup is more than those two. Like Max Williams has been a really dynamic player at the top of the lineup. He has, I think, 4 home runs in his last 5 or 6 games, and really strong supplemental pieces, literally and physically. And Daniel Cantu, Marco Dinges, and Jaime Ferrer. Like that's a lineup that's rolling like 6, 7, 8 deep. And with Tennessee, they have a lot of really good arms, but like, do they have a great arm? Like Xander Sechrist as of late has been their most reliable guy, but they need Drew Beam to get back to like early season Drew Beam and 2023 Drew Beam, because whether it's Florida State or a potential matchup, whether it's in the winners bracket or losers bracket against North Carolina and Virginia, like they're going to really need to pitch to win. So they definitely have the personnel to do it, but that is like, no one wants to end up in the losers bracket, but coming out of the losers bracket in that first like tier, bracket 1, I think they're calling it, is going to be hell.
So the last number 1 seed to win the College World Series was the 1999 Miami Hurricanes. So it's been a long time since a team like Tennessee, who is the number 1 seed in this tournament, has won the whole thing. So my question to you, Pete, is Tennessee on upset watch? Because you just broke down how much you like Florida State. They have the great pitcher at the top who can lead them to a victory in a lineup that can bang with Tennessee. But Tennessee's just been so damn good all year, so it's hard to pick against them. But understanding the history of how bad 1 seeds have done, do you think Florida State has a real chance to knock them off here?
Yeah, 100%. And to be totally blunt, like Tennessee is my pick to win the national title, but Florida State absolutely could knock them off. Like Jamie Arnold against that lineup, I think it's a pretty favorable matchup. Moore and Amick are 2 really talented right-handed hitters. But then you've got tough left-on-left matchups for guys, really tough left-on-left matchups for guys like Blake Burke, Kavaris Tears, Dylan Drying, and a couple of others. So like I think that's Jamie Arnold is a really good matchup, I think, no matter who you're throwing him against. But I think it's a pretty favorable one, assuming they go with him in game 1. And even if they don't, the other guy that they go with is Carson Dorsey, who has also been throwing the ball really well, and he's another lefty. So I think they're definitely on like upset watch. And I say upset with quotes because like no one's going to be viewing it as a crazy upset, even though Tennessee's the number 1 overall seed. But yeah, I mean, I like Florida State also has the pieces to go deep. I just wonder a little bit about the pitching depth, because they've got guys like Arnold and Dorsey, but there's going to need to be 1, 2, or 3 guys in the bullpen who kind of had down-ish regular seasons, but they're going to need to go out and give 1, 2, or 3 good ones at some point in the College World Series if FSU is going to dogpile, whether it's, someone like John Abraham, who's been solid, Connor Whitaker, and but like they're going to need someone of like Joe Charles, Andrew Armstrong, or someone else to go out and give them a couple of good appearances.
Is there a better offensive duo than what Florida State has with Tibbs and Smith?
I don't think so. Not in this field. Like those are 2 guys that are Tibbs is. I'm really, really high on James
I
Tibbs from the
texted you
draft.
the other day. I mean, like just from a swing perspective, just purely as a draft prospect, it's as clean as anybody, I think, in this class. Like that's one of the swings that I would get behind any day of the week. And the helium there with him's been pretty fun. And I like that they're kind of 2 different types of hitters too, but both do so much damage. Like, is there really nobody comparing to those 2?
I don't think so. At least not in this field. I
Wise?
guess. I guess like the top 3 in Tennessee of Moore, Burke, and Amick. But like if you're taking 2, man, because you still have a lefty and a righty with Burke and Moore, so it kind of works out. I'd still probably take Smith and Tibbs over those 2, and it's really, really close. But that is such a dynamic duo from an offensive standpoint, both from a power perspective, where both guys have this legit plus power that they have no issue getting to in game. And it's a real effortless power too, especially when you look at Smith. Like, I mean, he's got a big league body. He catches everything pretty deep in the zone, and his ability to drive the baseball with authority to the opposite field is really, really impressive for someone collegiately. And Tibbs, it's like plus hit, plus power, plus arm, really advanced approach. I mean, the barrel skills are very advanced as well. Like you can't really poke a hole in his game. So I'd go Tibbs and Smith over anyone.
Damn. So let's move to Virginia versus North Carolina, two teams that were well within the top 15 teams in college baseball. Both have similar records. Both in the supers, they went 2-0 in their matchups. Virginia taking down Kansas State, North Carolina taking down West Virginia. Pete, who do you like better?
Man, so this is a tough one because they played each other in the regular season, and I think Virginia got them. I'd have to double check, but I like, for all intents and purposes, like you can kind of flush that matchup because it happened so early in the season. But I kind of lean UNC here. Like, for as well as Virginia's been playing, and the key for them was they finally got their pitching going. And from a lineup standpoint, that is a really, really deep group. 1 through 9, there is no easy at bat, and the pitching has finally gotten going where, they've gotten a couple of good starts from Jay Woolfolk. Joe Savino has finally been the guy that I think everyone was expecting when they got him out of the transfer portal from Elon, just like a really steady 5 to 6 quality inning guy each outing. And he's done that in the last couple of games. And the bullpen, they don't have many arms that they're relying on, but they got their guys and they're performing, like that trio of Matt Augustine and Angelo Tanas and Chase Hungate. Like those are the 3 for him. And the pitching's finally figured it out, where I think in 5 regional games and super regional games, they've allowed just 16 runs. And it's been really impressive to see, because it's always been the offense, but like everyone has been pretty wary of the pitching. But on the flip side with UNC, they play so well at Boshemer Stadium, and away from the Bosch, they're between true road and neutral games, they're 10-11. And I think you can it's not nothing, but I don't think it's a major thing, because I think you can kind of throw that out when you're talking about Omaha. Like, it's so different than anything else that they would have been playing at. But, you have a star in Vance Honeycutt, and offensively, and Gavin Gallagher swinging the bat well, and Parks Harbor, like they can go toe to toe with a lot of teams offensively as well. And I think that their depth on the mound is what stands out to me on top of that high powered offense. Like, in the rotation, you have Jason DeCaro, who's pitching anything but an 18-year-old freshman. Like, he just turned 18, I think, in April. Shea Sprague is a really steady pitchability lefty. And then in the bullpen, they have Matthew Mathias, who I think is second in the country in wins with 12. And Dalton Pence has been really good. And Connor Bover. Like, there are a lot of weapons in that lineup. And defensively, where you have such a vast outfield at Charles Schwab Stadium, just like you do at the Bosch, where they play their home games, like that duo of Vance Honeycutt, who's an elite defender in center field, but you also have Anthony D'Onofrio in right, who, like, if it wasn't for Vance Honeycutt, like, he would be playing center field every day for UNC. Like, he's got legit speed. He's a great athlete, kind of a long rangy type of player. Like, they will hold it down in the outfield. So I kind of lean UNC here. I think that its pitching will hold UVA's lineup in check as like just enough, and the offense will come through with a couple of big swings.
Speaking to the athleticism of UNC too, I haven't looked at like team stats in college baseball that much, so I don't have a ton to like relate to in terms of these numbers. But I would imagine there's not a lot more teams, not a lot of teams that are more efficient base stealing wise than UNC. I have that they're 82 for 91 this year in the stolen base department. Like, that's absurd. As a whole team, that's a 90% clip success wise. Like, those are the little things I feel like in Omaha, you mentioned having to manufacture runs and then also being able to take runs away out, in the outfield. Like, do you think that being able to do those little things, and I know UNC though does come with some swing and miss. You mentioned some of those things that come with their game as well. Like, how much do those little parts of the game matter in the College World Series, or is it more of just like slugfest and who has the big hits nowadays with the way that the ball is finally starting to fly off the bat again. It's not the early BB core days where I would really lean into this narrative and say, oh, they're stealing bags, they're playing defense. Like, I mean, I'll never forget South Carolina sack bunting like every other at bat when we first were getting used to the BB core. Yeah, how much do you think those little things matter now on the big stage? Because UNC seems to be pretty adept to those specific nuances to the game too.
Yeah, it's a great question, and they're really like they have their system in which they steal bases, and quantity wise, like 83, however many they have, 83 for 92. It's not going to blow you out of the water, but like they pick their spots and they know how to run. And I think anytime you can get an extra base or an extra 90, like that's so huge. And not to, I think that more fits like a Kentucky team that we'll get into in a little bit, but yeah, like that's huge and crucial. Like, so, if a Vance Honeycutt gets on or Anthony D'Onofrio, those are their two big base stealers. Like they'll pick their spots and run. And those two guys are really tough to throw out, and they get on base pretty consistently as well. So I would not be surprised at all to see him swipe a few bags here.
So I know your pick for the whole thing is Tennessee, and you lean UNC over Virginia. These two games in this side of the bracket. Besides Tennessee, do you think UNC, if they face Florida State, who would win that one?
Oh, man, that would be a really good matchup because you'd probably get Dorsey against Sprague, and those are two lefties who are kind of in a little bit of a similar mold. And the more like Dorsey has some more stuff than Sprague. Sprague hasn't beaten the strike throwing department. Be a damn good game. UNC and its bullpen depth might be the difference maker there, because if Florida State gets into a little bit of a dogfight with Tennessee where they're going to use a couple of their best bullets, it's like, who do they have left if they got to go to someone in like the 6th, 7th, or 8th against a Carolina team? So I'd lean Carolina there.
Is there a part of you that thinks Carolina might just end up winning this whole damn thing?
There's a part of me that thinks any of these 8 teams could win this whole thing. And like, that's what's going to make it a lot of fun, I think, because every team is like, man, like, in just talking about all of them, it's like, why didn't I pick Florida State, or why didn't I pick UNC? Like, every team has a reasonable amount of depth on one or both sides of the baseball. I think the well-roundedness of Tennessee, and it's their 3rd time being here in the last 4 seasons. Like, they're not going to be fazed at all by the bright lights, and they know what it takes to get to the top of the mountain. And I think that this is the year they finally do it. But I would not bat an eye if UNC is the one dogpiling in the end, or even Florida.
So before we move on to the other side of the bracket, let's take a quick break. All right, Pete, let's move to the second side of the bracket. We got Kentucky taking on NC State, and we got Florida taking on Texas A&M. I like how Aram teed you up for the first side of the bracket. Which of these games are you more excited for?
Oh, man. I think Kentucky NC State is a really, really fascinating matchup. And if A&M was fully healthy, I probably would have picked them to win this whole thing. But the 2 significant injuries that they have, that's really, really tough. But I like the Kentucky and NC State matchup. Like, with Kentucky, they have such a unique style of play. They're a lot like, this is a deep-ish pull, but they're a lot like Wofford. And I think it's a play style that's conducive to success in an environment like Charles Schwab Stadium. It's like, they're not afraid to play small. They'll slash. They'll do a bunch of stuff that's really, really annoying for opposing staffs and pitchers to deal with. Like, you want to talk about a team that runs. I think they have over 130 or over 115 bags this year. Like, they will take extra bases. They will manufacture runs. They are not afraid to win ugly and just like scratch across, 3 or 4 runs and get it done. Like, in game 2 of that super regional, it was really just one guy who supplied the offense, and it was Nolan McCarthy. He had 2 RBIs with a couple of doubles. And then in the 7th inning, the game was tied at 2, and there was a back foot slider, gets away from the catcher on a drop third strike, moves up to third, sees the pitcher isn't covering home, still in a full sprint, slides into home. They go up 3-2 and they win 3-2 and go to the College World Series. Like, they will really, really turn up the pace and try and suck opposing teams into how they play. So I think that, like, where they're very comfortable playing inside the dirt, I guess you could call it, like, they're a really interesting team, and it's like an older, experienced group, really low heartbeat. I think where it's their first trip to the College World Series in program history, like, these guys don't have Omaha experience, but I don't think that they're going to be phased by the environment that they're in. And with NC State, their record of 30-21 doesn't jump off the page, and I don't really think anyone will look at their record and be wowed by it. But if you look at the quality of victory that they have in their series, there's arguably nobody better from a resume standpoint. Like, they've beaten all the top dogs in the ACC, including 2 in the tournament, including 2 in the Omaha field right now, and UNC and Virginia. They have a series split with Florida State. Like, they can play and win against all these teams. And I think with them on the mound, it's a little bit like Virginia, where it's like they lack depth, I would say, but they have their guys and they'll use their guys. Like, on the mound, it's, stock righties and Sam Highfill and Logan Whitaker, but they just fill up the zone and have been staying off the barrel recently. And that's led them to wins and holding a couple of really good offenses in check, especially with Virginia. And then that bullpen duo of Derek Smith and Jacob Duden is dynamic as it comes. Like, they will, for as long as NC State's playing, like, if they play, 4 or 5, 6 games in here, they'll be pitching in 4 or 5 or 6 of these games. Like, they will, they'll use every last bullet they have. So, on the mound, that's where they stack up. And then lineup wise, it's Makarevich and Pennington are the 2 dudes who are kind of supplying the power, I guess, with Jacob Cozart as well. They've combined to hit 59 of their 99 home runs, I think it is. But the supplemental pieces that they have, especially the last few weeks, it has been really, really impressive to watch them hit and watch their approach, because it is really advanced, high level at bats. They're not giving away any outs. Every single at bat is super competitive. They don't strike out. They move the baseball, which is so key. And they just, they make it hard. Like, they just wear opposing pitching staffs down. And it seems like everyone in the lineup comes up with a timely hit, whether it's Makarevich, who's been doing it all year, or even someone like a Brandon Butterworth. Like, everyone 1 through 9 can come through with that big hit. And that's why I have them right now as my national runner-up.
Wow. So I was going to ask you about the strikeouts, because I mean, the lowest K rate in the ACC, 15.8% throughout the season. And I mean, again, we kind of talk about what are the different ways that you can kind of win it all in Omaha, and what's, I don't think there's one structure or like one type of team that does it, but from the grind out AB side of things and put the ball in play and kind of put the pressure on the other team and kind of wear out their pitching, in a double elimination format, is that a big reason why you're back in NC State, or is it kind of just the well-roundedness to their game? Because, I think you see some other teams that, they're going to have a lot of power and they're going to strike out a bit, but without some of the top flight arms like you were talking about, I feel like being able to grind through some of these staffs, especially if you are facing elimination where it becomes kind of a war of attrition, could be a difference maker.
Yeah, like, I think, which is the case for really every single one of these teams, I'm kind of banking on NC State winning this game 1 over Kentucky and not going to the losers bracket. Like, I think if it goes, like, I don't know if they have the pitching to come out of the losers bracket. Even I cited the guys that they have, but that's going to be a really, really tough blow if they end up in needing to come out of the losers bracket, especially where they'd have to go through A&M or Florida and beat someone twice. Like, that would be really, really difficult. So I'm kind of banking on them staying hot and winning a couple in a row. But, like, that's going to be I think if you're like a baseball purist, that's going to be a really great game to tune into and watch. I think it's going to be super clean and professional. A lot of strikes on the mound, and guys who are just in the box. Like, it's not going to be the sexiest thing that you see, but it's just on both sides. Like, everyone's just in there to move the baseball. They don't give away outs. And it is going to be kind of just like whoever comes out of that one is going to be battered and bruised because it's going to be a war.
So moving over to Florida versus Texas A&M, two completely different paths of getting here. Florida basically on top of Jack Caglione's back as he hit 33 home runs, but the overall team was just a few games over 500, taking on a Texas A&M team that was a consensus top 5 team going into this tournament, but then they lose Braden Montgomery, like you said. So this is a matchup of two teams who scored over 20 plus runs in just their 2 games in the supers to get here. Florida already beat number 3 overall Clemson. Can they stay hot and beat number 4 Texas A&M, or does the run stop here for Florida?
Yeah, I think with Florida, and you could kind of get this vibe a little bit, even just from the jump in regional play, like they were pressing so much throughout the season. It felt like where, they had these midweek losses and they couldn't really get it going consistency wise and on weekends with series and stuff. And it was like, they were just playing so tight and tense and like, they're coming just to even qualify for an at-large bid for the tournament. Like they had to go down to Florida to go down to Georgia and win that last series of the regular season just to finish over 500. And they did that and went one and done in the SEC tournament. And I thought, while that series win at Georgia was great, I just didn't know if it would be enough to get them in the field, especially going one and done in Hoover. And they get in. And I think that one, they've long been talked about as the team, like no one wants to see them. But like they've more than lived up to that. Like I think that they've finally just exhaled and can relax and just play baseball. And it's just looked so free and easy the last 2 weeks. And they've always been a really talented team. Like Caglione is obviously the headliner on both sides of the baseball, but even offensively, like Ashton Wilson, true freshman, has really stepped up after Ty Evans got hurt. Cade Kurland is solid. Michael Robertson has been, he came through with the huge walk-off double to send him to Omaha. And, there are some other pieces in there. And then on the mound, again, Caglione, but Brandon Neely has been exceptional in regionals. Fisher Jameson similarly has been really, really good. Liam Peterson is a legit freshman arm. Like talent-wise, they can go toe-to-toe with anyone. So I'd be surprised if they go 0-2 here and bow out kind of quietly in Omaha. And again, experience is so important here. Like this was a team that was 1 win away. Like they were in the national championship game a little over a year ago, or a little less than a year ago, actually. So yeah, like I think that they still have some more noise to be made.
How does a team with a 6 ERA, it's a 6.16 ERA as a staff, and also one of the higher strikeout rates in the SEC, how do they do this? How does Florida get to this point? Is it kind of the Solely magic? Like, and you mentioned they were here last year. They have one of the best players in college baseball that we've seen in a long time. And I actually have a follow up with him because some weird stuff in his last outing pitching wise that I'm just kind of curious about. But just on the perspective of like, how in the world does a team with a 6.16 ERA and a starting pitching staff ERA of 8 get there? Like, was it guys just really underperforming through the beginning and hit their stride? Obviously, UF is going to have some of the best talent and recruiting classes perpetually and transfers. But like, I don't know, you just look at the cumulative stats as someone that hasn't been watching the whole year, checks in now, and you feel like you're looking at 2 totally different teams statistically, and then what we're seeing from the University of Florida right now on the actual baseball field.
It's a great question because like I'm kind of sitting here wondering the same thing. It's just like how they do it, and it's just guys have really, really stepped up when they've needed them most. Like Cags has been up and down, I think, pitching wise, for his career. And I think whatever he's given them on the mound, it's just been such an added bonus because of the bat. But like, Brandon Neely was nails last year and he's been used as a starter a little bit this year. And then they moved him back to the bullpen and he's been like, I don't think they're here without him and Fisher Jameson. And Jameson threw 3 1/3 perfect innings, I think, to close out the Stillwater Regional in that 7th game. And then, man, Neely was, I think, in the Saturday night game of the Stillwater Regional, Neely went 5 2/3 shutout, career high 11 Ks. And he he gives them good innings and at Clemson and Liam Peterson as well. Like, I think it's just, guys just bucking up and like, and turning in their best appearance when it matters most, because for most of the year, like the problem with Florida, like you said, the pitching was really inconsistent. And I think that like they have a ton of talent on that staff. And I think people are seeing that more as they're playing their best baseball this season. But like they were kind of throwing freshmen a little bit into the fire because they didn't have a choice. And the freshmen were pitching like freshmen. And that's not an indictment on anyone, and that's to be expected. But usually when the freshmen pitch like freshmen for some other teams, and even typically with Florida, given the caliber of talent that they have on their roster year in and year out, they're in pretty non-consequential spots, whether it's they're up big or down big. They can just kind of let them go out there and throw and figure it out. But like these were in meaningful games. So I think that everyone is finally stepping up. Like the stress is gone. They're not pressing, and you kind of see what that looks like. And it's a really, really dangerous team.
One more follow-up real quick, just because I'm fascinated by how they're going to use Caglione. Last outing, I mean, he got the job done and they beat Clemson, as Peter mentioned, but his velo was way down at the end of the start. And I mean, the overall velocity from the start averaged 91, but by the end of it, he was in the upper 80s. Has there been anything about that? Is anybody talking about that? Like, is that going to be something that you think might affect him if he comes out of the bullpen or gets the ball, in one of these College World Series games? Like, I feel like that should be discussed a little bit more, right? I mean, again, the end of the outing, it was sub 90.
Are you talking about Cags here?
Yeah, Cags.
Yeah, it's so like it's so like I don't envy Coach O'Sullivan and that staff at all, because it's like where would I throw Jack? Like where would he be at his best? Like I don't want to tinker with Brandon Neely right now in the bullpen. Like he's on a different level. Like, but then you take him out of the rotation and it's like, who are we gonna have start in place of him? And then that's like, I think you just got to keep him in the rotation and hope whenever he gets the ball that it's good Jack Caglione. Because when it's good Jack Caglione, like he will go 5-6 shutout innings and he'll make it look really damn dominant. Like the fastball is premium velo from the left side, like up to 96, 97, 98 at times. And then he supplements it with a really effective cut slider, and the changeup is a legit plus pitch. Like I have no doubt he's a hitter at the next level, but this stuff plays collegiately for sure. But I mean, you just got to hope and pray that it's good Caglione, because, when it's bad and the command isn't there, like the command really, really is not there. Like it is like he can't kind of finesse it and get through 4 to 5 workman-like innings and grind it out. Like he won't last past, a trip and a half through the order. So it's just like
Not a ton of concern about the drop in velo in that last outing. Like that hasn't really been much of a discussion.
I don't think so. Like if he comes out whenever he gets the ball, because like they're not going to leave Omaha without using him at least once, whatever that situation might be, it'll probably be in a start potentially in game 2, whether it's a winner's bracket or a loser's bracket game. But if he comes out again and it's like 89, 92, and be like, all right, what's the deal here? Because then that would be concerning. But if it's like a one-off thing, I won't really think too much of it, but I will definitely be looking for how it's coming out when he does make his first appearance on the mound.
So we got to hear the winner between Texas A&M and Florida. Who's getting past?
Man, this is tough because A&M's a perfect 5-0 in the tournament so far, but like they're literally like limping in here because even outside of Montgomery, Shane Sadow, who is an outstanding sophomore left-handed pitcher, he's got a chance to go really, really good next year in the draft. He's also now out for the season after suffering an injury, but Ryan Prager is really, really good and has been really good for A&M in that rotation. I think offensively, like there is still depth there outside of Braden Montgomery, which is a testament to just how deep and well-rounded this A&M lineup is. Like Jackson Apple's there, Jace Lavalette and Gavin Grahovic. That's a really dynamic duo, and even some of the puppies down in the bottom third of the order. I give the edge here to A&M, but they're gonna have to put Florida away early, because I think if Florida can go to Neely they'll go to him as early as the 5th inning if this thing's close or they're up a run or two just to put a stranglehold on it. If they can, like, I think they're going to need to jump out and take control of the game against Florida, because if it's close or tied or they're down a run or two, like, I think that Neely will go like four shutout or 4 where he gives up like a run or two, but it's going to be damn close. I think A&M comes out though in a battle.
What do you think it is about A&M that, can potentially separate them, I guess, from a UF? You mentioned some of the depth, and I'm looking at like some of the arms as well. I mean, they've got several guys that can, really run it into the mid to upper 90s. Like, I'm looking at a UF team that can get caught in the lull of swing and miss. Like, is it an A&M team that you mentioned gets up early, or is it a team that just puts up zeros and kind of gets this UF team looking one dimensional? You pitch around Cags and you attack these other guys and overpower them a little bit. Like, how exactly would you envision A&M being able to pull it out? I know you mentioned kind of get on them early, but beyond that,
I think the bullpen depth is really impressive, and I think that they have the upper hand there on Florida. And now rotationally, I think that the depth that they once had with Sadao and Prager with that 1-2 punch, that takes a severe hit with Sadao being out. But in a standalone game here, like, A&M's bullpen is like, again, that's going to be such a difference maker, I think, because after Prager, you're going to have Zane Budmayev, who's been really good, Chris Cortez, who throws absolute fuel, 98 to 100 from the right side, and you can get length out of him, and they've gotten a lot of length out of him here in the last few weeks. And Evan Oschenbeck in the back end, first team All-American type of guy. You can get 1, 2, or 3 out of him. Brad Rudis has thrown the ball really well. That's 4 or 5 guys after Prager that are really, really reliable options. So I think in just the standalone matchup, I'd probably give the edge to A&M just because of how many weapons that they do have in relief.
And then we're going for A&M versus NC State. Who's coming out of this side?
I picked NC State to be my national runner-up, so I got to go NC State. Like, I just think that lineup is going so good right now. Sadao being out, I really wonder about who like A&M is going to turn to, and someone's going to have to step up, and it's probably Tanner Jones, he had a really good start to the year, and then he kind of scuffled a little bit, and so like I think NC State can probably get to someone like Tanner Jones and just wear him out, just like they've done to every other pitching staff that they've come across. So I've got NC State, and I think that whether it's Fritton or Whitaker in that second game, it'd probably be Fritton. Like, I think that ballpark plays well and plays to its pitching staff strength. So I got to have NC State in a close one.
And so in Pete Flaherty's projected final, we got the Tennessee Volunteers taking on the NC State Wolfpack. Pete, you got your dark horse against your favorite. And we know that the last time the number 1 seed won was in 1999. Maybe I'm holding on to that too much. I just simply can't believe that in the last 25 years, the number 1 seed has not won the College World Series. I continue to say
bizarre.
it because it blows my mind every time.
It is pretty nuts.
Where are you at?
This will be an anticlimactic answer. I think Tennessee sweeps. Like this like I really like the depth they have on both sides of the baseball, which we've talked about. It is very favorable and conducive to getting through a tournament like this, where they would still have weapons to use in that final series. And I think that offense is just too much. And I know that NC State would have to kind of contend with potentially Texas A&M, but it would be nothing like the lineup that they'll see if it ends up being the championship matchup against Tennessee, like especially with Montgomery being out. And I think Coach Vitello, like every single guy on that roster is ready to go to war for them. They've been there so many times, but haven't been able to get to the mountaintop yet. Like, I think that they are like, they're ready to take that next step. And I think that they are starving to get there. And so I think they're just going to be too much.
So kind of just a more overarching question. Sorry, Peter.
No,
Something that like popped up when I was doing a little like stat query here. The bats have always been a fascinating conversation, because we've got the BB core era where, like I alluded to earlier, it was ridiculous how little pop these bats had, and they made them better. But of course, before that, you have the BESR stretch where, I mean, it was legitimately a hazard if you had some of these guys. I mean, if you had CAG swinging BESR, people would be in danger in the stands, let alone, in the field. So obviously these bats are better again. And I think that's been part of it. But also these guys, I was just talking about this with a couple pro guys, like these college players are better than we've ever seen. So that's also part of it as well. But I'm looking at this Tennessee team that has the highest slugging percentage in the BB core era and the highest slugging percentage in the SEC since 2000. Like, is that more of a testament? Yeah, highest slugging percentage in the SEC since 2000.
Oh my God.
Like,
That's insane.
Is that a testament to Tennessee, or is that a testament to the bats and Tennessee?
Man, it's such a hot button issue right now in college baseball.
I'm not even talking about it from like the who's using hot bats, stuff like that. I'm not putting you on the spot there, but like we know the bats are better. So like, is it a little bit more of like, just generally speaking, better bats, or is this Tennessee team that good? Because surprisingly, not too far behind them is actually the Georgia Bulldogs in the slugging department as well from this past year.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. And I think what else it is the balls. Like the balls are insane. Like the seams are so low. It's like hitting a golf ball. And I think that it's a combination of the bats and the balls and just how talented, like you said, these guys are, because like Blake Burke is, that's someone who in terms of raw power in college baseball, like I'd put him toe to toe with anyone. And you stick a metal bat in that kid's hands, it's like good. Like it is like a legit safety hazard. It's nuts. Like I think college should switch to wood, but that's another conversation. But I think it's a perfect storm of the bats. Like everyone swings a hot bat. Like it's, whether you want to hear it or not, all these bats are crazy hot. And then and it's not in a cheating way. Like it's just, it's how they get after you use them for so long. And, just how they're made. Like these kids aren't actively cheating. And I'm certainly not accusing anyone of it, but like you have the bats and then you have the balls. And then on top of everything, the cherry on top is like the talent level and the strength and just how these kids are built. Like, it's a recipe for something like we saw this year. I think it was over 19,000 home runs were hit at the Division I level. Like it's obscene. So
wait a minute. What did you just say? Did you just say 19,000 home runs?
After the super regional third game with State and Georgia, it was 19,001 home runs hit. And like that number just doesn't even sound like.
No, it doesn't compute. It doesn't compute for me.
We need,
but like it's bananas. And so like, it's just balls plus bats plus beast
kids.
Yeah. And freaks literally. And that's what you get. It's got to go to wood.
This is a message to the NCAA. If you want to advertise and market the College World Series, just put a graphic up that says 19,000 home runs were hit. I guarantee you, people won't even care. They'll just be like, all right, I'm turning on the game. I don't even, and then Aram, I even want to go back to it. You just kind of glossed over the fact that Tennessee, like it was a part of your question, that they have the highest slugging percentage in the last 25 years.
Yes. Yeah.
And it makes sense.
That's insane. I didn't even know that.
College baseball is fun, man. Like at the end of the day, like, sure, I want to see some balance to it, but like, I like Peter and I, like, we want to see some bombs when we're tuning in. Like, come on. Like, I'm not here. I enjoy the pitcher's duels. Don't get me wrong. Like, and Louder Skeens I'll never forget that. I was in London. I literally stayed up all night to be able to watch that. That's great. But I also want to see bombs, especially out there in Omaha, which totally unrelated question, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this while having the college baseball and draft guy on here. We got to see Rintaro Sasaki take some hacks. And he's, for those who don't know, like, came over from Japan, right? And he's the all-time high school home run leader in Japan, if I'm not mistaken, playing for Stanford, playing in the draft league right now. So he'll be a freshman at Stanford this coming year. He hit an absolute mega nuke in the draft league the other day. That was with wood. And like, I'm another guy that with metal, like it's borderline hazard. What can you tell listeners about Sasaki? Because he went viral yesterday after that home run. And, I know that people are probably wondering, what the deal is. Like, is the hype real with this kid?
Yeah, it's legit. At least from an offensive standpoint, because it's 70 power, wood or metal. And, he's also got a knack for consistently being on the barrel, and like the hit tool overall is advanced. So like, this kid is a monster. The comp that has been thrown around, and it's kind of the popular one, is like he's the Japanese Prince Fielder. And from a body type and offensive standpoint, I don't think it's crazy far off, especially from a power perspective. And he's going to be, everyone got a taste of it, the first of many tastes they'll get last night when he went 2 for 5 with a home run. And then I think he hit a 105-mile-an-hour single. Like, he's going to be a high impact, middle of the order bat for Stanford for a couple of years.
And when he does go to the draft, do you think he could go number 1?
I don't know about number 1. Like, that profile is really tough because it's first base DH type. Like, he'd have to really, really, really hit. And, like first round, he has that type of upside, I think, but I don't think 1-1.
Interesting. So Aram, he's got Tennessee beating NC State. After hearing him break down all the teams, where are you leaning right now for your winner?
So, I mean, I just looking at the Tennessee numbers across the board and
absurd.
They're absurd. And that's what Pete has said, for the last couple of weeks when we even check in with him. But just through the conversation, and just kind of the way that he laid things out. And I know that you kind of came away this way too, because I know you, and I kind of saw your face and like your follow-up question. UNC, like I can see it. I'm starting to believe it a little bit here. Or like I could see UNC making some noise. So I think Tennessee's the obvious favorite. And as you've mentioned a couple of times, like that means they're fucked. So I think from that lens, like I'm kind of leaning UNC, but I obviously think Tennessee is the obvious pick, but I don't know, the way that Pete kind of like laid out UNC, and then when I was looking at just what they're doing in the stolen base department, the defense, when you can go get it out there. I mean, we just saw it didn't end up working out, but the catch Canarella made in center field, and like the way that can make or break a ball game for you. Now you have Honeycutt and another guy out there that are going to cover as much ground as anyone. Like, I'm kind of buying the UNC, the UNC vibe here.
So I love that, because I think it's easy to pick Tennessee. Not to say that Pete just picked the easiest one. Like, you go through the numbers and it's like Tennessee, I know they're the number 1 seed and there's the curse there, but I mean, I've watched them too. They are unbelievably good. But just for fun, Aram, UNC, love the pick. Who are they facing off with in the other side of the bracket? So just another reminder, on the other side of the bracket, you have Florida, Texas A&M, Kentucky, and NC State.
I'm going to go. Pete told me on Kentucky too. Like, I think they've got something special. I know he said NC State, but honestly, like inadvertently, I think he made a really good, or probably inadvertently, made a really good Kentucky pitch. I like NC State and the way that, the way that they can grind out ABs and the way that, Pete kind of laid that out. But I'm going to go Kentucky. I just think they've got a little bit of magic to them this year.
I love it. In my bracket, I think I'm going to go with Florida State coming out of that side. I think Pete described them as, I think, his least favorite team of this side of the bracket, but I'm still going to go with them.
If least favorite, like, not to get too off track here, probably Virginia.
Okay.
Whoever wins that Tennessee Florida State game, I think, is coming out of that side.
And so that's what I'm thinking here, because we have Jamie Arnold, who's arguably the best pitcher in this tournament. And you're talking about Tibbs and Smith being the best duo from an offensive perspective. So if I got the studs here, and I know that the number 1 seed hasn't won since 1999, do they knock them off early? They use that momentum in order to win the whole thing? I'm talking myself into Florida State right now. And then on the other side, Pete, I think I'm sticking with your NC State pick. You kind of fired me up. And I love a Pete dark horse, because Pete's favorites never win, but his dark horses are so damn good. So I'm going with your dark horse choice with NC State, and then I'm going with Florida State. And I got freaking Florida State winning, because all I know is if I got the pitching advantage and I got 2 guys who can make an impact at any single point, that's a team that can win the whole thing. So give me Florida over NC State. Aram, you got UNC taking down.
You got Florida State. Sorry, you got Florida State over NC State.
My bad. I got Florida State taking down NC State. A lot of states here. You have UNC taking down Kentucky, correct?
Yes.
And Pete, you got Tennessee taking down NC State.
Yeah.
Pete, before we leave, just an elevator pitch for fans who might be a little reluctant to take a break from Major League Baseball and move their eyes over to college baseball.
it's kind of baseball in its purest form. Like, these guys are all playing for each other. Like, it is evident how much they love playing alongside one another. It's, for a lot of these guys, potentially their last taste of baseball, and for a number of them, their last taste before they go to professional baseball, and everything drastically changes. And they call the College World Series the greatest show on dirt for a reason. Like, it is a really high, it's like, and especially with this field of 8, it is an extremely highly talented, professional like group, and it is a ton of all unique play styles. And it's just a blast to watch them play. They play the game really, really hard. It's clear just from watching them how much they love to play. And I think that it's unfortunately kind of rare to see that in today's game. So I think that the overarching theme here is just the purity of it. Like, it's really, really unique and a fun event. And whether you're there or not, I'd encourage tuning in to as much of it as you can, because I guarantee you that you will be hooked.
Arm, you got anything else?
The way I always kind of label it is like there's just a different level of give a shit, and it's infectious because you can kind of you can feel that the kid that just so desperately wants to win and keep that baseball career going, or just so desperately wants to win that title. Where, not to say that they don't love that and feel that way at the big league level, but it's just different. It is totally different. So I think that was a perfect pitch, and it's a big reason why I tune in every single time, because you can just feel the passion and the love for the game and the desire to win.
Pete Flaherty from Baseball America, really appreciate you coming on the show. Feel free to plug everything that you're working on, because you're consistently putting out just incredible work. And we're definitely going to have to get you back on for when we're really getting into the draft, because right after this college baseball season ends, we're in draft season. And those are some of my favorite episodes, because I get you, Arm, and Jack on, and I just sit and shut the hell up and I just listen. And I just grin ear to ear. And it's fun for me.
Yeah, I love college baseball, but man, the draft and like player evaluation, that's my wheelhouse, and that's what I love the most. So I humbly accept a future invite on for the draft. But just kind of grinding away on a whole variety of things, whether it be on my Twitter at Peter G Flaherty, putting out stuff and analyzing players there over on baseballamerica.com with college content. And then as the draft cycle or the draft itself gets closer and closer, there'll be a lot more draft stuff on there. So whole variety of things. I think everyone listening to this episode is pretty savvy when it comes to social media. So you'd be able to find me on there, and my DMs are open, and I love to chop it up with people. So, feel free to slide in, and we can talk about guys.
Aram, I got to say, and I am sure you agree with this also, Peter's Twitter is the best Twitter follow for anyone trying to get into college baseball. There's so many highlights, so much data. You get plenty of articles. So make sure to go follow at Peter G Flaherty on X, Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. We all know the app.
It's so good that you got people duplicating the tweets out there all the time. So
shout out to my man Redacted for that one.
So that'll do it for this episode of the Just Baseball Show. If you enjoyed, please leave a 5-star review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, and a written review would be the best way to support. Another way to support, go get yourself some Just Baseball merch. I'm rocking the hat. Arm's rocking the tee. Pete hates us apparently and is not rocking any Just Baseball merch, but it's okay. We'll give him a pass here on the draft episode. I know you're going to come merched out. So come merched out like Pete Flaherty. Go get yours in the episode description below. And you need tickets? Game Time. Download the app Game Time. Use code Just Baseball. You want to bet? Maybe you're thinking, wow, Peter sounds really smart and handsome about Florida State. Or you actually listen to the smart guys and go with Pete Flaherty's pick and go with Tennessee. Or you can go with Arm's pick and UNC. Code Just Baseball. For Arm Layton, Peter Flaherty, and I'm Peter Apple. We'll see you tomorrow. And with that, thank you, everybody.